Nobody picked me, she thought, kneading the hem of her dress until her fingers ached. The orphanage yard was a mosaic of hopeful faces and discarded dreams. Every year, the same ritual. Carts rumbled in, hands reached out, and the chosen children walked away toward new names, new homes, new futures. She had learned to stand very still, to make her eyes small so others wouldn't notice the hollowness where a child's hope should be. She had learned to be invisible. They called her quiet. She had been quiet so long the word had become part of her. Quiet like the shadows under the eaves, quiet like the hush before rain. The other children played at being noticed, singing, dancing, reciting lines to sway the buyers. She stayed to the edge, tracing the cracks in the stone with the tip of her boot, watching the world pass like a slow, indifferent parade. The day the bidding began, the air smelled of dust and horses and the metallic tang of expectation. Men in coats and women with parasols examined faces as if choosing a horse at auction. Most bids were small and practical, a trade for labor or a child to keep house. There were smiles that hid calculations, hands that lingered to measure strength. Each name called forward was like a thread pulled from the tapestry she had woven around herself. She trembled when a hand finally reached for hers, not in the way she had imagined as a child, warmed by tenderness, but in the cold, clinical way of a person acquiring what he needed. The hand belonged to a man who spoke curtly, eyes scanning a list. He took her with the efficiency of a ledger entry and left her heart beating hard for reasons she could not name. They led her away to a house that smelled of leather and pine. It was neither grand nor austere, but it held the certainty of a place shaped by regular rhythms. Boots on the mat, the clink of a metal cup, the steady creak of the porch swing. He did not call her into the warm center of things. He had a small place for her in the margins, near the kitchen, near the scenes of work. She learned quickly to move without being noticed, to keep her tasks tidy and her voice smaller than it had to be. He was a quiet man too, and that was perhaps the first thing they shared. He spoke seldom and with precision, each sentence a deliberate choice, as if speech itself had weight. People called him a cowboy, though he wore no swagger and told no tall tales. He was a presence like a well-tuned instrument, steady, unshowy, reliable. He watched the horizon with a look that suggested patience and private pain. For weeks they inhabited the same house like two ghosts, passing without collision, exchanging duties without warmth. Then came a day of storm clouds and a runaway mare. The horse came into the yard like a thunderclap, nostrils flaring, terror in every muscle. The cook cried out, chairs skidded, the dog barked and fled. The orphan girl stood rooted, heart leaping into her throat. The cowboy moved as if of one mind with the world, calm, immediate, decisive. He stepped between chaos and harm, his boots steady in the churned earth. The mare shied, and in the narrow second where disaster might have taken shape, he reached out and took the reins. When the dust settled and the horse was calm, people gathered as if they had witnessed not just control, but a kind of courage. He did not boast. He spoke to the animal in low, steady tones, and then turned, almost by accident, to the girl who had watched with both fear and wonder. His eyes met hers with a clarity that felt like recognition, as if he had seen something worth keeping. "Mine," he said, and the single word dropped into the space between them with the gravity of a vow. It was not the brusque possessiveness of commerce. It was the naming of a responsibility he chose to carry, an acceptance that she would belong to the structure of his life, not as property but as a person whose presence he would not let be auctioned or discarded again. "Forever," he added, and the cadence of the second word made it less a contract and more a promise sealed in simple speech. She trembled then for a different reason. Tears rose to her eyes, not of fear but of relief so deep it felt like the tide returning to a dry shore. In that instant she understood that belonging need not be loud to be true, that a steady hand and a steadfast gaze could be shelter as tangible as any roof. The quiet cowboy had offered what no bidder in the yard had the power to sell, a place in the story of a life. Years later she would remember the moment with the clarity of a weathered photograph, edges softened by time but the central truth intact. The world had not been transformed by a dramatic rescue or a sweeping declaration, just a man who understood the weight of a word, and a girl who had learned to wait until one was spoken to her. Mine. Forever. The echo of those words kept her steady through seasons of joy and loss, through ordinary days and rare splendors. They were not chains but anchors, and in that steady tether she found the freedom to become someone whose quiet was no longer the absence of voice, but the presence of choice.